Europe is like a big city. A place for all to live and work, move and meet, and enjoy life. Most of our people live in cities. They produce most of our economic output and also most of our emissions. That's why the future of Europe will be decided in cities. Yes, our world and our way of life are fragile. Good that our network of European cities is working for a better future for all in the city of tomorrow. Together, we are shaping the urban future.
Hello, and welcome to the 2020 Eurocities Annual Conference. My name is John Paul Judson, and I have the pleasure of being your Master of Ceremony and moderator over the next 2 days, to the point where even my furniture has taken the new colors of the Eurocities logo. Now, of course, the feeling is not quite the same as last year, when we were all together in the beautiful city of Prague. Like the topic of this year's conference, the conference has had to reinvent itself and move online, like with many other events and meetings these days. I know that it's not quite as satisfying to be sat in front of your screens, participating in yet another online event. I know that we all miss the pleasure of being able to exchange views and thoughts face to face, of getting to know new members, of seeing old faces. But to look at the bright side of life, instead of being all together in one beautiful city, we are all together in many beautiful cities across Europe and beyond, all connecting at the same time to experience this event together. So I propose that you tell us from which city or town or village you are joining us from. You can do that by responding to the poll in the little Slido box you will find to the right of your screen. And together, we will build a giant word cloud that will celebrate cities reinventing themselves. I would also like to strongly invite you to make use of the Slido tool throughout the events. We are on a very tight schedule with a lot of speakers in a short amount of time, and I won't pretend that we'll be able to take up all of your questions orally, but the Slido tool, like any interactive tool, is also about you not only in the spoken part of the event, but also helping you connect with other participants to see what other people are thinking, saying. As we face the second wave of lockdowns, life in cities is being turned upside down. All what makes the city a city has been shut down, whether it's hotels, cafes, bars, restaurants, cultural activities, large-scale events, business tourism, even just moving freely. It's the fabric of city life that has been affected first and foremost, in a way that I cannot imagine a rural area will experience in the same way. And what is striking with this lockdown crisis is that despite minor variations from country to country, the measures have been quite uniform, meaning that across Europe, cities have all experienced something in common and almost in parallel. It's not every day that the same challenge affects all cities in Europe in almost the same way at the same time. So has there ever been a better time for a network like Eurocities to raise awareness on the importance of European coordination to solve common challenges in cities? Perhaps this is the pivotal moment. So I'm looking forward to the next 2 days, and I hope that you are too, whether you are joining us on the event platform, viewing directly on the Eurocities website, or tuning in on Facebook Live. We are joined by great keynote speakers. In a few moments, we'll be hearing from Greg Clark, and this afternoon we have the Vice President of the European Commission. We'll also be hearing from close to 30 mayors from different cities across Europe. And on that note, I would like to hand over straight away to Anna Koenig-Hjelmeyer. She is Mayor of Stockholm and President of Eurocities and will give us her welcome address. Anna, over to you.
Thank you so much. And dear colleagues and friends, it's a real honor for me to welcome you to Eurocities' first ever digital conference, which I have to say, unfortunately, take place during very difficult times. Not just because of Corona, our democracy is being threatened in Europe and across the world. And we were also shocked by the tragic attacks in Nice and Vienna. And I would like to use this opportunity to express my heartfelt sympathies to the mayors of Nice and Vienna and all their citizens in the name of our network. I know that we are all looking forward to a time when we can meet again in person, but I'm just thankful that so many of you can be here today. When we decided to make a significant investment in Eurocities' digital tool last year, we didn't see a pandemic on the horizon, but the decision could not have been more timely. And it did put us in an excellent position to make the best of a difficult situation, as did our work on the strategic framework and the new ways of working. And I'm so proud of everything we have been able to do the past year. Week after week, Eurocities hosted online workshops, webinars and discussions that allowed us to keep up the work and continue to shine a light on the urban dimension, not just of European policies, but also of a global health crisis and a recovery that simply has to be green and just. And thank you so much, Analisa, to you and your team for all your hard work and efforts to make this happen. And also a special thank you to my Swedish team that also are here in the room with Malin and David and the others. And with that said, we have a very interesting 2 days ahead of us with important discussions on urban resilience and the terms of European recovery, and an AGM that will feature several important decisions on the functioning of our network. But before we come to that, we have to ask ourselves the question, do cities actually have a future? And if so, what does it look like? I am delighted that Greg Clark, our friend and one of the leading global experts on urban developments, and a true friend also to our network, could be a keynote speaker for this opening session. And I cannot wait to hear your thoughts, Greg, and reflections on this theme. So welcome once again to Eurocities Annual Conference 2020, and a big hello from Stockholm.
Thank you, Anna, for these words also of prudence in these times. I would like to now hand over straight away to Analisa, Bony, Secretary General of Eurocities, for her welcome words.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul and Anna. Good morning and welcome, everyone. I hope you're all in good physical and I'd say mental health. Not easy to hold it together these days with all that is happening around us still. I must say that opening the first ever online Eurocities annual conference feels a bit weird. I'm so used to having this moment once a year where I can talk to you in person and share, a couple of intense days of hard work, networking, and also fun and friendship. That being just in front of a screen seems really like a lot is missing. Still, that's life in times of COVID, isn't it? We are all experiencing it. So, what is the message I want to share with you at this moment in time? Maybe apart from let's hope Biden makes it. And within just 5 minutes, I'd like to say plenty of things, of course, but that's not possible. So let me concentrate on the following thoughts. Europe is deep in a multitude of crises that the pandemic has, can we say, X-rayed in a way and accelerated. Most of them have hit and will continue to hit the urban level very, very seriously. Beside the health crisis, the economic, the social, the climate, the security crisis, I see two more crises. One, a weakness in governance has become even more evident now. A clear weakness in how the national and the European levels have managed and are managing the pandemic and what goes with it. We have seen important gaps in resilience, solidarity, coordination, innovation. Of course, I don't want to be too harsh, as it's really a difficult job and challenging time. Still, I think that cities have been the most capable in the whole COVID landscape. It's 9 months that you have been at the forefront of all this, very often without the necessary powers, competences, and resources that you would actually need. But if you look, you've been the most able to respond to these unique times. You have shown emergency skills, resilience, openness, creativity in both dealing with the short-term needs, but also in launching reflections and actions on a different future for your urban reality. All our cities have understood how important it is to build back in a new way and to take the opportunity of this disaster to rethink strategies, reinforce resilience, build on solidarity, both at the local level and across the borders with, all of us here now. Cities are proving pragmatic, visionary, and caring at the same time. The best qualities of a leader, I think, aren't they? Anyway, so many people in cities are losing their jobs. The tourism and the culture sectors are being destroyed. So many more vulnerable people need to be taken care of now, and so on. It's so very pressurizing and urgent. So keeping a lucid and at the same time a long-term systemic vision, it is hard. And besides, cities need to prioritize actions that are able to address these multiple crises at the same time and propose solutions that are able to combine economic renewal with climate neutrality, environmental protection with social justice, citizens' participation with energy transition, and so on. So working daily with so many of you as city leaders and administrations is reassuring because you are trying to imagine a greener and fairer future for your city. And you're doing it through the energy and the contribution of citizens, communities, local actors. And that's powerful and needed. So that was governance. The other crisis I'd like to highlight here is a crisis of imagination, a sort of disability in using the power of imagination, in envisaging a different way of living, and above all, in generating a longing for a better future, for instance, a more sustainable future. The biggest thing Europe needs these days? Tons of imagination. And you know what? Thanks to their proximity to citizens, cities can bring it to the table. They can bring imagination and generate that longing in society. Because more than ever, we need collective intelligence and thinking out of the box, more than ever. And cities can provide that. So if Europe really wants to recover and recover in a positive way, the EU institutions and the member states will have to register this key evidence and potential of cities and act accordingly and give cities that seat at the national and European tables. Otherwise, nothing will fly. Europe will not survive. This is a unique chance for Europe to imagine a new future, to rethink what our cities and our continent could look like through a totally different, paradigm. And of course, networks like ours will be happy to harvest and translate all this imagination into proposals for policy, for positive policy frameworks at the EU levels for the years ahead, and build on this strong cooperation between cities to inspire solidarity also within Europe. Because this crisis has highlighted one thing. It has highlighted the importance of solidarity and of simply being human. Citizens and cities have shown the way in this. So to conclude, I would like to thank all our cities for doing what you do every day, for believing in your mission, so dedicated to care for and improve citizens' lives. It gives us, who work for and with you, lots of purpose. And thank you also for playing the game of flexibility and resilience, together with our team, for the health and strength of our beloved network, Eurocities. So good luck to each and every one. Let's continue unleashing our imagination and do our best to be part of the solutions that will help cities and Europe to recover and become better places for both the planet and people. May the force be with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Analisa, and a warm round of applause I hear from the audience here for these welcome words. We will now go straight to our keynote speaker, Greg Clark. You've heard from our two welcome addresses that cities are not lacking crises. They've been hard hit. They're in the forefront. You are global head of future cities and new industries at the HSBC Group, where you lead the bank's work on cities and mobility with its global client base in 63 countries and 300 cities. So, in your view, do cities have a future, and what future will that be? Greg, we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Jean-Paul, good morning. Thank you very much to Anna and Analisa. Can we now have the slides up, please, so that I can take control?
The slides are up. You can take control.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead with this then. I'm going to try to answer 3 questions in this brief presentation. And the 3 questions are: how has COVID-19 impacted upon city economies? What kinds of city economies will we have after COVID-19? And to what extent will Europe have cities that are different from other parts of the world? Now, in order to do this, I'd like to frame this conversation with a reminder that we're living in the 5th decade of the century of the city. From 1980 to 2080, the world's population is moving from 40% urbanized to 80% urbanized, something that, of course, the distinguished mayors here all know. And we also have plenty of evidence, as you can see in the left-hand corner, that cities are good for us. But we also know that we have a risk of both bad urbanization as well as good urbanization all over the world. And the contagion that is coronavirus has begun to reveal some of the features of bad urbanization which need to be addressed through the course of the pandemic and what happens next. We also know that in this century of the cities, European cities have begun to play very important critical roles, not just as established global cities that are well known from previous cycles, but they've also begun to become the cities that are combining very high quality of life with very progressive climate and social policies, with specialization in new growth industries that are accelerated by technology. And they've put that together with good governance, often with a high investment equilibrium, and with a partnership agenda that marks them out as being different from other cities in other parts of the world. And as a consequence, European cities, despite their smallness in size relative to the rest of the world, have begun to score very well on all sorts of measures, as you can see here. Now, into this context, we need to think about COVID-19 not just as a global health crisis, not just as an economic shock that will trigger a recession that will have all sorts of consequences, sifting and sorting between productive and non-productive businesses and industries and locations. But we should also think about COVID-19 as an agent of change. And this agent of change, I think, has 3 distinctive phases. Firstly, there's the phase we're in now, which is pandemic management. There will then be a second phase, which is a kind of recovery phase. And ultimately, there'll be a reset phase. Now, one of the reasons that this is rather complex, and one of the reasons that there's so much distortion in the global media about the future of cities, is that people are extrapolating from the pandemic management phase as if it was already producing long-term trends, and they're therefore predicting the demise of the city, when all of us know, and anyone associated with cities know, that cities are incredibly resilient, they tend to innovate in the face of challenge, and nearly every pandemic we've ever seen before has produced amazing innovations that cities have used to spur a new cycle of development and success. Now, if we think about COVID-19 as an agent of change, what are the vectors of that change that it's going to be an agent of? Well, one of them is clearly to do with trade and supply chains, which have proved to be not very resilient, even though they may have been efficient. And a massive agenda around relocalization, onshoring, sovereign capability has emerged. The second one is obviously to do with technology, digitization, and the new as-a-service economy, touching everything from healthcare to education, to retail and shopping, to entertainment, and to every other aspect of urban life. The third one is clearly to do with health, human health, healthy living, but in particular the inequities and the inequalities that have been revealed in public health and in the way healthcare services work, and the adequacy of those health services to deal with a pandemic. The fourth one is connected to the planet, to carbon, carbon neutrality, and action on the planet, as the connection between human health and planetary health has been revealed as being much more intense, much more deeply connected than we ever understood, whether it's in relation to air quality and respiratory health, or whether it's connected to food and biodiversity in the animal kingdom, or whether it's the experience of lockdown, which in so many countries has seen a larger drop in carbon emissions than the loss of productivity that went with it, effectively decoupling productivity from carbon emissions through a kind of unplanned experiment. The fifth area, of course, is a big change in politics, both the global politics with the retreat from multilateralism, but also the politics of how citizens and nation states interact, with nation states taking much more power to control people's lives. And then the sixth area is the idea of a new social contract, which has been emerging as part of the fairness agenda that's arisen here, but also part of the experience of people leading different kinds of lives during this pandemic. So if we think about the medium-term implications and we think about that recovery and reset, these six vectors of change that the pandemic has revealed seem to me to be important ways of characterizing how that change might emerge. Now, for all sorts of reasons, this is giving rise to a very big alert about jobs, because the digitization process and the closing down of key industries is clearly affecting jobs very directly. And in the longer term, jobs that become mobile because of technology are much easier jobs to delete. And on the other hand, there's been a city's alarm that has emerged from this pandemic, because so much of what the city is good at, that Analisa and Anna have already described, has been temporarily closed down. So where does this leave us in terms of city economies and what's actually happening? Now, one way of thinking about this is to look at the sectors that have been impacted. On my horizontal line here, you see sectors highly negatively impacted on the left-hand side, and you see sectors that have been positively impacted on the right-hand side. On the vertical axis, you see the degree of certainty about whether these changes are permanent or not. So aviation and travel, restaurants and hospitality are perceived to have, as it were, a permanent downgrade, whereas issues to do with culture, sports and art, higher education, physical retail may have opportunities to come back depending upon the duration of the pandemic, the behaviors that people adopt during phase 1, and then the carried changes that occur in phase 2. This is COVID-19 as a change agent. And you can see on the right-hand side many new sectors where there's a high degree of confidence that these sectors are going to continue and thrive in the next cycle. Another way of looking at this is to think about the built environment in cities. You can see very clearly with this simple traffic light diagram that there's a whole series of land uses and built environment functions which are perceived to be up. Data centers, home working, last mile logistics, medical related activities, everything you know. And also you can see in the bottom part of that box, the spread towards a more distributed kind of urbanization. Big opportunities for second and third tier cities and suburban locations, real estate as a service, etc. You can also see a set of built environment uses that are perceived to be down, at least currently, and many of them have already been mentioned by Jean-Paul and by Analisa. And then there's another set of uses of land and buildings where the outlook is uncertain. And it's uncertain because of questions about how agile those will be, questions about what the new models will be. For example, how will university degrees be changed? Will we move to a more modular system? All of these things will affect the land uses in cities and their built environments as we move forward. Now, if you think about this in terms of medical scenarios, We have, of course, the race for a vaccine and the race for testing going on. But one way of thinking about the transition from phase 1, pandemic management, to phase 2, recovery, is to think about how different kinds of medicine might enable different parts of the economy to emerge. And you can see very clearly that it's only when you get a reliable, trusted, comprehensive vaccine that many of the core activities in the urban economy are really able to recover in an important way. Now, another model, of course, is to use scientific testing to really help populations exercise the face-to-face and face-to-place activities that are so important to cities. And therefore, there's a twin race on to try to achieve that. And of course, in many parts of Asia, we've seen how testing has really been working effectively. Now, thanks to the Financial Times for this glorious chart, which we won't study in detail, but what it tells you is that national economies are already beginning to recover more quickly than large urban economies are. In other words, we're right to observe that urban economies have been more negatively impacted by this pandemic and the crisis that goes with it than national economies have per se. So urgent action for cities is warranted and required. So what about Europe's city centres then after this pandemic? I think we can observe 5 trends that may emerge. Firstly, the rise of the more hybrid city, the blended city, that I'll talk about a little bit in a minute. Secondly, a big focus, I think, on endogenous economic growth, focusing on knowledge assets, innovation assets, and infrastructures. My slides have jumped away. If we could have those back, that would be helpful. Thank you very much. Thirdly, a strong focus on industrial diversification, on green growth, and on environmental sustainability, and using these drivers of change to really build new economies in those spaces, and revised trade and supply chains as a driver to diversify city and regional economies. There will be accelerated agility in land use due to this surge in remote working. Buildings and land use plans will need to be much more agile. We'll have many more types of hybrid activity happening within the same buildings. And of course, there'll be a much greater uptake of healthy kinds of travel, including walking and cycling, but that will lead to the emergence of much more polycentric and metropolitan cities. Now, this blended city approach, I think, overcomes this idea of a winner-takes-all fight between the physical city and the virtual city. People will simply make more choices about where they live, how they work and consume, and when they travel. Cities will have to adjust to this and to pursue economic sectors that are really embedded in the urban environment. And the changes to the shape and size of cities will require various kinds of governance reform. And city leaders will need to tackle the risk of fragmentation and segregation, especially in the way digitization processes work. Now, in all of this, we can say something about the future of Europe's cities. It's easy to be a little bit despondent and to say that Europe's cities, compared to the rest of the world, are smaller in size. They have age dependency ratios that are more difficult. They have fewer of the high-tech companies. And there is a narrative out there that Europe's cities are, as it were, going to suffer more from this crisis. I, however, want to take a more optimistic approach and say that Europe's cities are actually world leaders in all sorts of things that the COVID-19 crisis proves that we need, in sustainability, in culture, in education, in knowledge, in infrastructure, and in good governance. So I think that the DNA of Europe's cities is that they are able to provide leadership for the world at a time that it's needed, in these new areas of growth, in culture, in education, in knowledge, in habitat, in food, and in the wise use of technology. And if we think about the future of Europe's cities, we should be optimistic about their ability to become specialists in these sectors that the world so badly needs. And in these ways, we will be able to renew the DNA of Europe and its cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Greg. And again, a virtual round of applause for tackling the challenges, but also for an optimistic view. And we will, in fact, straight away now go to the view from the ground, from the cities themselves. We are joined by a number of mayors. We have 9 different mayors from, I think, 7 different countries. We also have a member of the European Parliament with us, and we will be able to hear from them what their perspective is, how they are living through these different crises, and if they also share your optimism as to the future of the cities for them. So I would like to turn straight away and travel to Bristol. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Marvin Rees, Mayor of Bristol. Do you hear some of the challenges also that you're facing in Bristol that you've heard so far, and how are you approaching these testing times?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love listening to Greg's analysis as well. It's very, very powerful, insightful, refreshing, to put it mildly. There were a couple of things that really stand out for me in what he said. One I'll refer to at the beginning, one I'll come to later. First off, when he talked about this being an agent of change, certainly one of the ways we've been describing the COVID pandemic is that it's every system in our city is being tested. Our education system, our food system within the city, transport, public transport. We even had our elections postponed. So I'm on an additional year because the elections were put back a year because we couldn't host elections. Everything is being tested, which is an incredible challenge, but it's also an incredible opportunity because we can learn about what makes us resilient, where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are. And actually therein is the agent of change. Change that is forced upon us, but also the opportunity to design change and lead change in a way that's informed by this awareness of our strengths and our weaknesses. Within that, what I hope is that as we learn from that, what we don't indulge in is a values-free dash for growth at the other side, which I'm fearful of. That in an effort to get the big numbers moving in the economy again, we put aside considerations of climate and nature inclusion, and we try to bolt those on to the bigger, more important goal that some might see it as just getting the economy moving again. I think that would be the wrong approach. There was a couple of things that I had to share if I'm able to go on, or did you have another question?
No, please go ahead.
Okay. So there were a couple I've just got a personal thing to bring to you, but also a statement from the UK core cities, because you'll be aware that not only are we going through COVID, but we seem to be tumbling towards Brexit and a possibility of a no-deal Brexit. As I've spoke to my European fellow city leaders, I always point out that Bristol voted to remain. Our cities have a different political orientation, quite often to the national government. And the UK core cities, which are the 10 biggest cities outside London, including Nottingham, Bristol, Cardiff, Glasgow, Manchester, Sheffield, Leeds, Newcastle, have written a statement. And it's a statement of solidarity with Eurocities, and it's a statement about our commitment to remain connected. And what we'd love to explore is how we as UK cities can stay connected to other European cities, to European countries, and to the EU as a whole. And we would welcome a chance to explore with you how we can build those channels, irrespective of what does or does not fall out of the negotiations between our national governments. So what we've said is that as we approach the end of Brexit transition period, city-to-city collaboration at a European level and cooperation within Eurocities network has never been more important. UK core cities remain trusted partners committed to shared European values, including those of solidarity, inclusivity, peace and cooperation. We stand shoulder to shoulder with our European partners in our commitment to work together. And we can share the fuller version of that statement also. On the question of the future of cities, I'd just say a couple of quick things. If we keep tumbling through into the future, I think it's good. Life, it's not a question of whether cities will be with us, it's a question of what they will be like. I'm very concerned that certainly in my city, we've never really had a plan But I think now is the time to reconceptualize, replan, and then rebuild our cities. In line with some of the points that Greg was making, actually, about the future patterns of life that cities face. And I hope that one of the things I think challenges we need to take on is to think about what are those new financial vehicles that can accompany cities on 10, 15, 20-year journeys of reconceptualizing and replanning themselves. At the moment, with a very centralized financial system in the UK and centralized sovereignty, cities do not have the space to redesign themselves and replan themselves. But I think that if we can look at these new financial models, we will get the space to really take a lead in shaping our own future, rather than having that future land upon us, either through the ins and outs of national government and international organization negotiations, or untamed global forces that land on us. So I think this is a time really, this is the age of Eurocities for me. I think we are seeing the weaknesses of our national governments, and now's the time really for cities to really grow into the fullness of their leadership, not just in terms of what goes on inside their boundaries, but to begin shaping the national and the international context in which we all have to work.
Okay, thank you very much, Marvin. And I would like to now go to Bilbao to meet with Juan Mari Aburto, Mayor of Bilbao. Marvin in Bristol was talking about the possibility that a rapid recovery might lead to, a less concern for certain key values such as, nature and climate change. Do you also have a similar concern in Bilbao?
Egunon, that's the way we say here in the Basque Country. Good morning. Firstly, our thoughts are with Nice and Vienna. I would like to thank you because despite the health situation brought about by COVID-19, not without difficulties, but with much effort and determination, the Eurocities network is making progress. This is virtually adapting itself to the needs and to the present times, so that it is still a great platform for reflection, debate, and proposals from the largest European cities. It is our turn now to share ideas and reflections, cope with the social and economic consequences of this pandemic. We cities are in a complicated situation that puts tests and challenges in our way that we have to be able to overcome. Bilbao is a city with a great capacity for snapping back, as seen in previous crises in which political leaderships and public-private collaboration have been the catalyst for successfully transforming the city and its citizens. At this time, Bilbao must continue to be a city led by and for the people, focused on being a city of values. We were putting our heart and soul into this work, but now, more obviously, we must work hard to achieve a more balanced, more cohesive, greener and kinder city for our children and adults, better connected to the outside world, diversified and competitive. To tackle the pandemic in Bilbao, we have launched the Bilbao Aurrera plan. In our language, Euskera, Basque language, Aurrera is forward, because we do not want to give up on progress. Despite the difficulties, we want the people of Bilbao to understand that we are at their side and applying ourselves every day to get out of this crisis. Bilbao Aurrera, Bilbao Forward, is a social, economic, and cultural emergency plan, which has been allocated 15 million euros and includes 50 exceptional measures aimed at alleviating, reactivating, and recovering the effects of the COVID-19 health crisis on people and companies in the city. Aurrera, Forward, is a word that in its broadest meaning also implies growth, because he who advances grows. In the case of our city, in the case of Bilbao, we want and are working to ensure that our growth is sustainable from an environmental, social, and economic point of view. I am not going to go on any longer. I would just like to reiterate my thanks to the organization and send a message of encouragement to all the mayors of European cities. Because although we are facing difficult times, I am convinced that we will overcome this situation and our cities will then be a space of coexistence for everybody, more cohesive and characterized by values. Eskerrik asko, thank you so much.
Thank you, Juan Marie, for this vision from Bilbao. We now move a little bit further north to Nantes. I believe Johanna Roland is with us. I will now switch to French. Johanna Roland, est-ce que vous êtes bien avec nous?
Oui, tout à fait.
Ok, merveilleux. Donc, on va passer en français. Est-ce que je pourrais juste vous demander de faire des petites pauses après chaque phrase pour permettre à notre interprète de bien suivre et de nous donner alors votre perspective depuis Nantes?
Bien sûr. Bonjour d'abord.
Of course. Hello, everybody.
Vraiment ravi de vous retrouver.
Really delighted to be here
dans ce moment compliqué
with my colleagues this morning. It's a tough time for European cities. Thanks especially to the whole team that's put this together.
Je crois que dans le moment difficile que traverse
It's a difficult moment which we're going through with the health crisis in Nantes. It's also an economic and social crisis. We've worked together as a network to try to get through this. It's really important we work together at a European level.
Mais au-delà de sa dimension conjoncturelle, je crois surtout qu'elle vient révéler les paradoxes de notre modèle de consommation.
There are certain paradoxes in our models which we've got to look at.
La capacité, l'énergie, la créativité, quelque part.
Thinking about the energy use in cities, the creativity of cities. This is an opportunity to invent. It's really important in our regions to go on with this.
Peut-être pour donner un exemple, parce qu'ils sont nombreux.
To give an example,
avec attention les collègues précédents.
I've been listening to my colleagues.
Des choses à regarder autour des sujets.
We've got to look at some things together. For example, food is a subject which I've been thinking about for a long time. In terms of sustainable economic development. At Nantes, we've been part of an effort to support local production, to accompany a local digital platform for retailers. I think we've got to look at things at a European level of how we regulate trade, especially digital trade. It's really considerable strength that these digital platforms have. At the beginning of my introduction, I talked about an acceleration of the crisis. Even if our states make different decisions about the crisis, there's been a real limitation of movement, a limited of exchange.
Tous les domaines, se loger, se vêtir, se divertir, et alors, dans ce moment particulier, les grandes
in this particular moment,
place centrale du marché
the place of mayors are really important.
Nous devons aussi en mesurer les conséquences directes. Les conséquences directes.
There's been a real important influence in terms of the digital trade.
Sur la fragilité du pouvoir d'achat. Il y a là, je crois, trois
enjeux. We've got to be aware of the fragility of markets. We've got to give retailers a good opportunity.
Mais au-delà, je crois que c'est vraiment le sujet d'un écosystème alimentaire dans nos villes.
I think we've got to think about a food ecosystem in our cities and an ecological transition which we're to make in this time of crisis.
Je sais que Clara Dobrev, ici présente, agit en ce sens sur le fait d'amener la régulation des géants du numérique dans le projet de nouvelle législation qui a
It's really
en
important
décembre.
to produce some regulation of the big digital giants which are trading online.
Les villes sont celles qui inventent des solutions concrètement sur le terrain.
Cities are the ones which invent solutions at a local level.
Doit nous permettre de faire évoluer la
And
législation pour que
we've also got to make sure that legislation evolves at a European level to deal with these digital giants.
Est-ce que après cette crise, parce qu'il y aura bien une après-crise, on veut retrouver
after this crisis, because there will be an after crisis,
ou est-ce qu'on veut enclencher sa transformation vers une économie
are we going to be able to make this transition happen? Is it going to be sustainable? I think that the cities are really key in this question.
Je proposerais donc volontiers, chers collègues, qu'en tant que membre d'Eurocities, nous puissions porter en quelque
sorte, as a member of this group of cities, we've got to act collectively, we've got to act at a European level, we've got to think about the purchases of citizens at a local level.
Parce que je crois que dans cette crise, il y a un risque. Le risque, c'est la
There's a risk at the moment, and it's taking away the voice of citizens. There's a real focus on the voice of experts at the moment. We've got to add to the crisis, we've got to inject into the crisis a democratic voice. We've got to allow citizens to express themselves.
Alors, permettez-moi, chers collègues, de vous inviter
so let me just say, invite you to talk about a second initiative in Nantes.
Vous entendre dans la diversité de vos situations pour commencer à
I'm aware of the diversity of our situations.
Nous pouvons tirer de cette crise pour la transformer en opportunité.
We can use this crisis to discover an opportunity to become laboratories of the future.
Merci encore à tous
Thank you,
pour cet échange
everybody,
évidemment ce matin, mais
for this
pour
chance to share ideas,
travail qui est fait dans la durée.
and for all the work which has been done.
Difficile, plus nous avons besoin de solidarité.
The more this situation becomes difficult, the more our role becomes important. Thanks, everybody.
Un grand merci, Joanna, d'avoir été avec nous. Les commerces de proximité, la démocratie participative, donc deux points très importants et qui sont sévèrement touchés par la crise. Donc, on va en parler. We will now switch to Spanish. Y vamos a viajar a Barcelona, donde vamos a encontrar al alcalde Ada Colau. Ada, ¿está con nosotros?
Sí, estoy aquí.
Bueno, perfecto. Bueno,
muchas gracias.
Great. Thank you very much.
Barcelona y ¿cuál es el futuro?
And what is the future?
Pues, muchas
well,
gracias
thank you, and I'd like to thank the Eurocities team for being in this meeting with me and for your work in general, which you're doing. Thank you so much for your inspiring words, as always. And I'd also like to say hello to the cities in Nice and Vienna, which have been very hardly hit over the last weeks, and we really feel for them. And in this context, which is so difficult with terrorism and multiple crises, it's really hard to talk briefly. And I want to say sorry because I can't stay till the end of the event, so I would like to say sorry for that. So I'm just going to speak as quickly as I can, and I'd like to share 3 points with you in case they're useful for you. First of all, I'd like to talk about the diagnostics. What's really happening? It's obvious that we're really living through a health crisis and an economic crisis, which is very difficult. And I think this COVID crisis not is the reason of the crisis, it's the result of a previous crisis. And I think that's very important to say that. I think that before we weren't in a normal situation before. what we had before, there was already very serious problems. The situation before COVID was a systematic crisis with the economic situation, which was already difficult, with inequalities, and there was also cruelty as part of that. And there was also a problem with care, looking after life, looking after children, looking after old people and ill people. There was lots of problems with the care system already. Also problems with looking after women who weren't earning enough, and this was also a problem before. And now we have lots of problems with old people's housing. So there were lots of crises before with the ecosystem, with the climate change, and there were lots of problems with the public services, which has all led to this public health crisis as well now. So I think that in this context of crisis with the systems, this has also led to more problems and now we have an inequality crisis, and COVID has come as part of this. And also the economic crisis has come as part of COVID. And I think we're all trying to plan for the future, and it is very difficult because there's so much uncertainty. And I think that it's a false idea that when you think about the vaccine, everything will be solved, because this is a lie. I think that when you get the vaccine, we will have a vaccine for COVID, but we'll still have a systematic crisis. We'll have climate change, a problem with care and inequality, which will still be a danger for us. And today it's COVID, but tomorrow it could be a different crisis. So, without being too dramatic, I think it's really important to give a correct diagnostic, to find correct solutions. And in this context, I think it's important to say that we must really talk in Europe, which is very positive. We have to change this crisis into an opportunity to make some changes and some transformations, which we already knew we had to do. But there was a lot of resistance to making these changes. Because every time there's a change, everybody's very resistant and doesn't really want to change. So now we're changing the economy, and we have to really prioritize care and reduce inequalities and reduce the effects on the climate change, and therefore we have to really push the idea that change is necessary, not just the vaccine. Change is necessary. And in this context, my second point is that what is the role of cities? Cities, we have this historical problem that we really have a lot of the population and lots of the challenges in our cities, and we do not have a lot of budget or capacity to deal with this. And we need to change this, because this hasn't changed. So cities are closest to the population, and we have to always give answers, but we don't have enough resources. However, we don't complain, because cities are used to, as I said before, innovating and cooperating, and I believe that we have to make this our strength now. I think there are two main points which characterize the policy of the cities, which are a big strength to face all of these problems which are coming up now with the COVID crisis. I think that cities are very close to the people, close to citizens, and we can collaborate with citizens to face big challenges. And we also are very innovative. And being close to citizens and innovation are big points to respond to the systematic crisis that we have, which is very difficult to deal with. But if we need big changes in the macroeconomy, being close to the people, we can do things in a different way. In Barcelona, as in many cities, we've seen, for example, that people with the COVID crisis, many cities have been dealing with urbanism. We've been trying to reduce the use of cars. We've increased all of these things to help the climate change and giving people more space and reducing the uses of cars. And this is something we're doing together with the citizens. And we're changing the way that people travel. And we're doing this with lots of imagination and not very many resources. I could give more examples, but I don't want to go on too much. But I think that these points can explain lots of things that we're doing on a local scale. And another thing that I think that's very important in this forum of Eurocities and for the network that we're doing, which is really, and all of our work, which is really great with the European organizations, what we need to talk about, it's really key that we share this diagnostics and these local policies, being close to people and innovation, and the European funds. We all know that we're going to say things just as they are now. We all know that there's lots of pressure with lobbying in the tourism sector has been incredibly affected by all of this. Also, the housing sector has been very affected, and all of these sectors are now pushing to have the European funds. So there's lots of pressure with all of this. So the European funds are being asked to be used for this, and we also have to reduce carbon dioxide, and we're moving into a digital world, especially in the big urban zones, and we need to use some of the European funds for these urban projects, and the European funds need to really be used to change. What really needs to be changed is the transformation which needs to be made, and not only saving economic sectors which really have had big losses. I think that we can really be part of making this transition into the digital transformation and in a very correct way. I think that these points are very important, and I really want to make most of this meeting to say these messages. But I think that it's very interesting to share this idea with you so that really we don't just patch things up, but we really make the transformation that we need, and we face the changes that we need to do. The cities, and I insist, we have closeness with the people, we have the capacity to innovate, to go along with this transformation. And as I don't want to go on too long, I'm leaving it in these 3 points, and thank you ever so much for being here. I'm very happy to see you, even if it's only on the screen, and I hope that soon we can all meet again physically. A big hug for you all. Thank you.
Ada. Indeed, Ada was mentioning that, you know, it's a crisis that added itself to an existing crisis of inequality, and cities can really play a central role in the transition after the crisis as well, to really channel resources to the right sectors. So I think that was a very, very important point. Before we continue our little trip around our whistle-stop tour around Europe to visit different mayors, I would like to just take a quick stop in the European Parliament and go to Clara Dobrev, who is Vice President of the European Parliament, who can also give us a bit of a European overview. And she was also mentioned by Joanna Roland in terms of her work in the European Parliament. So it'll be interesting to hear also what your take is, having heard from Greg Clark and already a number of mayors this morning.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much to Eurocities organizing this conference and inviting me, and it's really an honor to be with you. I've been preparing myself in the last couple of days for this conference, especially to talk a little bit about the MFF, about the recovery facility, about the Just Transition Fund, which are, I think, quite important areas of our life. But allow me to change it a little bit. I'm definitely sure that I'm not the only one watching this event who was awake all night to check the US election, or maybe some of you had the first thing in the morning to look for the newest development, or even now during the debate, you are just one eye keeping on the situation in the United States. And why I'm bringing it here, because I don't want to hide that I am disappointed and shocked. And it doesn't matter who you are voting for. The question is that people are so divided, so frustrated, and such a huge tension, and emotional tension among the people, which is, I think, frightening. And it's not about the United States, as we heard from the mayor of Bristol. It's about Brexit. It's about the growing number of populism in Europe as well. And this is something what we have to do with it. And why I'm bringing it here to this conference, because I was thinking in the last couple of hours, how is it possible that when you ask people what are their main concerns, then they would say climate and the environment we are living in. They would say in the middle of the COVID that healthcare and good answers from the scientists. They would say social consequences of the globalization and how we tackle it. And at the end of the day, the answers of a huge number of European citizens as well, not only American ones, are those politicians who are not proving solutions, but even having politics which are denying climate change, which are anti-scientific in the theme of pandemic, or which are elitistic in a distribution of the wealth and the economic wealth among our people. And when you ask yourself, why is it like that, then I think my quickest answer would be, and of course there will be a lot of analysis in the next few days, is that in this globalized world, simply people are feeling powerless. They feel that they have lost control over their own life. They lost control over the circumstances they live in. And what people would like to is to get back this control, to have an influence on the healthcare they are receiving, on the education, on the circumstances, on the world they are living in. And Analisa at the very beginning said, and used the expression, I just really noted it, weakness of governance. And yes, I think that's what they feel, that now at the beginning of 21st century, in a globalized world, weakness of governance on national level and weakness of governance on global level as well, or international level, that's what is really frightening the majority of the people. And the question, how is it possible? What can we do about it? And to tell you the truth, and that's why I'm bringing it to this conference today, I think the best solution is simply to grab an old world and fill it, and really fill it with content. And this old word is subsidiarity. And you may say, oh my God, as a politician, I cannot imagine a political rally when I'm standing on the Bune and asking the crowd, what do you want? And they shout from hundreds of mouths that we want subsidiarity. But you should not be mistaken, even if it's a complicated word. People really want subsidiarity, because that is what is going to bring them back the control over their own life. And what can we do about it? You have to know about me that I'm a strong federalist. I really do believe that the challenges of the 21st century cannot be tackled only in national state level. And of course, even the Treaty of Lisbon gives the major stakeholders, the nations, the biggest power, and the governments, the national governments, the biggest power in decide about our issues. And we see this conflict when we talked about the Green Deal, when we talked about just transition, or now during the COVID crisis, that they have to be some really good tools on European level in order to tackle these crises much more effectively. But on the other hand, what was proved in the past few years, that the real solutions which are really affecting the everyday life of our citizens have to be made on local level, on the level of cities. You are the ones who know exactly what your small and medium-sized enterprises are starving for. You know exactly, and you see exactly the COVID pandemic effect on tourism. You see exactly what's happening in your hospitals, in your healthcare system. You see exactly what's happening in the social area, how many people have lost their jobs and what do you help them. And people originally go to their local governments, to their mayors, to their city regions in order to get the answer and to get the help. And I would like to tell you that as Vice President of the European Parliament, being responsible for the Committee of the Regions as well, I've worked a lot to make the new MFF, the Just Transition Fund, or even the Recovery Facility, an instrument which gives much more possibility and much more power and much more funds to regions, to local governments, to cities. But that's not enough. And this morning showed me exactly that how little this is. We are in the middle of the process which was stopped by the COVID pandemic, and it's called the Future of Europe Conference. Now we have to change the institutional setup of our European Union. Now that's the moment when on one hand, we have to have much more possibility in the European level to coordinate, and we have to give much more possibility, funds, tools, and power to local government in order to answer the everyday challenges and the everyday questions of our citizens. If we do not do it, then this kind of feeling of our voters, of our people, of our citizens is going to remain. They feel frustrated, they feel anxious, and they do not see a secure future in front of them in this globalized world. And the answer to them is given mainly by local governments. So what I would like to ask you, and especially the Eurocities, who has a huge history and a long history in organizing the world, that besides talking about the urgent issues, because of course MFF, Recovery Facility, Just Transition Fund, they are very urgent, and we have to push in order to have much more partnership on those funds. We have a huge task in front of us together to make a reform of our institutional setup of the Union. Because if we do not do it, we are not going to be able to answer to our citizens' questions. So let's take subsidiarity, find a new expression for that because it's quite difficult to explain to the people, but that's it is, and fill it with a new content because that's going to be the solution and that's going to be the future of our Europe. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure the Eurocities network will be more than happy to work with you to rethink subsidiarity in a new institutional setup. And it's probably very much required these days to get back to the local level. As also Joanna Roland was saying, a lot of initiatives to engage with citizens done by cities. So well understood. Thank you very much, Clara, for having been with us. And you're welcome, obviously, to stay. We now move north to Helsinki, where I have the pleasure of introducing Jan Vapaavuori, Mayor of Helsinki. So what is the role of the city in creating this new environment post-COVID and recovery?
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, dear everyone, I think a year ago, before the Corona crisis, it was quite clear for everyone that we were witnessing a time and era of a growing role and importance of cities. There were several reasons for that. The urbanization as one of the global megatrends itself, of course, led to a growing power and role of cities. I think it had become evident that in many cases, both the willingness and ability to tackle global challenges was bigger in cities than in nation states. In many cases, it became evident that the toolkit cities had was also in many cases more relevant than the toolkit of the nation states in tackling big global problems and problems of our people. And maybe the most important, as my fourth point, was that cities have, by definition, a much closer contact and dialogue with the citizens than nation states ever can have. And I think that it's important to understand that the Corona crisis didn't change this at all. I think it's today it's even more true. It's even more evident that it is the cities who play the main role in creating a better world, in tackling big global transformations, problems, whatever they are. From a Helsinki point of view, I would like to mention the mission of the city, the topic of our city strategy. For 3 years ago, we decided to title our strategy as the most functional city in the world, which is what we aim to be. I knew already at that time that it was not maybe that media sexy, but I strongly believed that in a rapidly changing world, full of insecurity, a place which could be reliable, predictable, functional, could even become luxury. And now, after having fighted the corona crisis here together with my colleagues all around Europe, I think it's even more true today. And maybe the lesson learned for us was that everything matters. You need a comprehensive approach. You really need a holistic view. A strong city is a city with as few weaknesses as possible and as many strengths as possible. My third point is that every crisis is also an opportunity for change. Systemic change through crisis has been common actually in history. The oil crisis in the 70s led to a birth of renewable energy business and to a big emphasis on energy efficiency. The financial crisis 10 years ago led to a revision of global financial regulation, and the COVID will certainly lead to an increased speed of digital healthcare, distance learning, remote work, and many other quite evident issues. But I do think that the COVID-19 is maybe also leading to a even better understanding of the role and importance of cities in tackling relevant, real-life, everyday issues which are really relevant to the citizens. And there I strongly believe that European cities, Eurocities, have a great opportunity to show the road forward to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Jan. And we now move to Portugal, where we will meet with Ricardo Rio, Mayor of Braga. Ricardo, over to you.
Good morning, Jean-Paul. Greetings, obviously, to our President, to our Secretary General. Congratulations on the great work on putting up this digital edition of the conference and the AGM tomorrow. And greetings, obviously, to all the mayors, to all the colleagues that are following us, and to all the people attending to this conference. I will start my intervention by going back into Analisa words when she mentioned failure in governance. Putting it in a more positive way. That is, I wouldn't blame the national or the European failure, but I would value the empowerment of the local authorities and the capacity that local authorities have shown to be an example of how to deal with this pandemic situation. And I think that the biggest secret for that are two issues that I always try to build throughout my terms here in Braga, which is the building the trust of citizens and obviously building an alignment with all the institutions. And therefore, when we are able to engage the citizens and to work together with all the institutions, we are obviously prepared to have better solutions that address the issues that we are dealing, either the pandemic or any other matter. And I think that on this subject, we also had the capacity to show the flexibility and the fast reaction from the local authorities to address many topics that in certain situations, like in Portugal, weren't even under the responsibility of the local authorities. We had to deal with the prevention measures. We had to create further solutions in terms of health. We had to strengthen the social support to many domains, and even obviously to foster the economic recovery for our companies and for the whole people in the city. And within that framework, I think that the value of collaboration that many of you have addressed is crucial, because even if we have many different realities across Europe, the capacity to replicate initiatives and specific policies to address some topics was really of great value, because we could replicate things that were being made in the Eastern Europe. We obviously copied things from the Scandinavian countries, and in each of these topics, that benchmark and that share of experience was of a great value for all the cities and for Braga in particular. Also, I think that this time has been an accelerator of trends. Some have already been mentioned, the sustainability issue. One other issue that is very important, which is the management of public space. For instance, here in Braga, we already had a policy of creating what we would call the public space as a stage. We had many events, cultural, sports events in the open space, but now we also brought to the public space economic activities, the restaurants, the bars, the coffees, and the gymnasiums. We allowed many companies which had restrictions on their normal activities in their facilities to come to the public space, and obviously to develop those activities in the public space. And obviously the strengthening of pedestrian zones, the appropriation of people of the public space by the people. Also the social inclusion, it's another topic that is more and more important, because one of the things that this pandemic brings is the asymmetric evolution for many people in terms of education, in terms of economic condition, in terms of the access to health provisions. I think that is also another issue that is very important in the current circumstances. And to end my intervention, I would leave a final note that may be addressed probably by Greg in his final remarks, which is, I think that in a certain sense, we have a shift in the quality of life patterns, because right now we have the possibility of working, of studying, of shopping from wherever in the world. So I think that the things that we will try to bring to our cities are now different, and the things that we have to provide to our citizens are obviously different. And that leads us to the words of Ada Colau when she mentioned that we have to involve the cities and the local authorities in the construction of a European strategy and the management of the European funds for the near future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ricardo. Yeah, I will keep these words of rethinking the outdoors. Something like that from Braga. That's really interesting. We're still going to hear from another 4 mayors. I will really ask you to stick to time so that we don't overrun too much. And we now travel east to Gdansk, where we meet the mayor Aleksandra Dulkiewicz. Aleksandra, are you with us?
All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Great to see some of you. I do hope that you are all fine. Thank you very much for the invitation to this panel. I would like to share very briefly some of remarks from the city of Solidarity. So I'm really grateful to Marvin Rees, Mayor of Bristol, for mentioning this crucial value. In my opinion, we should really put our effort as a local leaders, as a city mayors, as local authorities, people who are running our regions, to keep in mind that the solidarity and the European cooperation is very crucial for recovering after this crisis. Now we are all somehow involved. So I still bear in my mind this would happen in spring, March, April, May, when even European cities, members, not cities, countries, members of the European Union just closed the borders, and there was no other way to keep in touch, to stay and cooperate and share the experiences. Therefore, I really, really deeply believe that not only European leaders, so I'm really grateful that also members of the European Parliament, as the Vice President Dobrev is today with us, that we should all bear in our mind that this is not the way to survive together, just to close the borders and quit the cooperation. Short remarks from my city, the city of Gdansk, in Poland. Very briefly, as everyone, we are trying to support our local businesses, different ways, different supports, but this is something what we deeply believe that will save not only jobs, but also local businesses for the future. The other way we try to not only survive, but also develop our social experiences is to cooperate, of course support, but cooperate with the non-governmental organizations with different fields. I will just give 2 examples. One is support of the families who need to be kept at homes. Therefore, we also have, probably as in every single country and the city, problems with the not only physical but also emotional violence. This is the crucial issue also to support people in those needs. The other issue where we cooperate with the NGOs is to stay in touch and also integrate immigrants. We still in Poland don't have this crucial politics on the national level, but on our local level, this is really important to integrate immigrants, those who are still in our cities, in our local communities, those who didn't leave, and those who don't want to leave. This is very important to see immigrants in the field of our working as a city administration, but also, as I would like to stress, non-governmental organization. Something what I really deeply appreciate is that not only our organization, but also many different organizations for cities, for regions, for local authorities, local organizations. We started to share our experience, to cooperate. I deeply believe that we can learn from each other because many problems are very, very, very similar. So this is what I really would like to stress. Solidarity, as Mayor Rees said, and as Mayor Abrantov says, hope. Those 2 values should be extremely important for us and believe that we will survive together and be stronger after this crisis. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Alexander, for insisting on that concept of solidarity, which I think is at the heart of Eurocities, but maybe that's a question also to Analisa and Greg in the end. You know, is there a future for solidarity between cities as well? We now go southeast. We go to Cluj-Napoca, where we will meet with the mayor, Emil Boc.
Thank you. Greetings from the very heart of Transylvania, Romania, dear colleagues. I'll try to be very short, and I will emphasize 4 ideas. First, I think in this very moment, we do need desperately a new European dream. As the founding fathers of the European Union 70 years ago established peace and prosperity after 2 world wars as a European dream, now we have to move to the next level, something to inspire the new generation, to create emotion and to mobilize the entire European Union. I don't know what is this dream. I may have some ideas, but I think we should work together from the bottom-up perspective to build up this new dream of Europe. Second, and for that, in this very moment, we need more Europe, not less Europe. That's definitely the case. And European Union, after the beginning of the crisis, was slowly, COVID-19, but now is back on track and is acting real as a union. And we have to push as much as you can on more Europe, not less Europe. Second idea, from my perspective, every mayor from this Europe should think and act green and digital. And you know what does it mean, and this should be part of our philosophy every day. Third idea, in this very moment, I think we need a very strong support around the cohesion policy. And let them all understand that the cohesion policy is not just a technical objective of the European Union. It's a fundamental value at the core of the treaty of the European Union, and is the value which is bringing us together, is the glue which is bringing the Europe together. And now more than ever, we need desperately to support and to emphasize the importance of the cohesion policy, and of course, in that context, to support for the COVID-19. So, using this perspective, I will emphasize the last idea, how important it's to stay together to create what President of the European Commission said, the healthiest continent on Earth, and to have by 2050 the climate neutral continent, but you cannot have a climate neutral continent without climate neutral cities and regions. And from that perspective, we need three things. Integration of European funds. It's important to know exactly where you can have the funds, not in 10 places differently. It's difficult to follow up. Integration of funds, active subsidiarity, and multi-level governance. Working in this perspective with more Europe than less Europe, I think we can have the best life possible on Earth, on this continent, in Europe. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Emil. And I imagine that cities will be playing a key role in the European dream that you have in mind.
Just one idea, as I said, concerning the COVID-19, our approach was eco, not ego. Eco approach, together, not ego, and one single Cluj, as the mayor of Braga mentioned it, it's exactly our case, bringing all the community together in one single Cluj in an eco, not ego manner. Sorry for interrupting and adding again.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Thank you very much. We now turn to Prague, where we were all last year, where we will meet with Mr. Zdeněk Hřib, the mayor of Prague. The life has changed a lot since we were in Prague together last year.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to this exciting session. And thanks to the other panelists who really pinpointed the important things ahead. And I would like to thank especially Professor Clark, who pointed out that we really have to put extra speed in the areas of innovation and dealing with the issues of over-tourism. And in these cases, actually, I believe that this COVID-19 situation is definitely a crisis. It bears extreme costs, but it is also an opportunity for both of these two areas. Well, the over-tourism issues has been largely mitigated by the COVID-19 crisis, but I think that this is just temporary. So I think it's a sort of timeout that we should use to deal with the problems related, for example, to the Airbnb and similar platforms that are able to eat the cities from inside. And the second thing is the innovation. And yes, we definitely have the modest track of record of innovation and venturing, and this is something that we need to make better. And I believe that the EU funds that we are be able to use in the upcoming years is definitely a way how we could move ahead in this field. So that is actually one of the reasons why I decided to join my colleagues from the V4 capitals, and together we formed the Pact of Free Cities 1 year ago. And definitely we would like to ensure greater direct funding for major European cities, because that is the way. And therefore I'm very glad for the words I have heard from Vice President Dobrev regarding the subsidiarity, because that is really the way. Put the things closer to the people, to the local administration, to the municipalities. And last year in Prague, I told you who, if not us, and when, if not now. And this year, I dare to say that we are the ones we were waiting for. So let's just work together and fix this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. That sounds actually like a good title for a song. It's quite catchy, so maybe that's a good one for Eurocities to take up. We go and finish our tour now in Stockholm, where we rejoin with Anna. Are you still with us, Anna?
Yes, thank you. I've just been listening very intense on all the wise
I can imagine.
Say it from my colleagues, and this really shows the strength of the network for us from both EU and non-EU member soon countries to have this collaboration. It's very concrete, and it's also hopeful, because as Analisa said in the beginning, I think that the cities during the pandemic's really shown that we are very flexible. For us, we have transformed the education in our high schools in a digital way that usually take years. We've done that in a couple of weeks. And you can see that kind of different examples from city to city, where we, during this pandemic, really shown how we can transform and use new technique and innovation to battle this crisis. But you also seen in the history that we have many crises in Europe and around the world, and especially when it comes to pandemics. We saw it in 100 years ago with the Spanish flu, and what happened next in the 20s during this awful, devastating pandemic with the Spanish flu. We could see that after that we had the Roaring 20s. With a lot of innovation and rich cultural life that really exploded. So you could also see that what happens with our city after a huge crisis, yeah, we will rise again, but everything perhaps is not the same. And that's why it's so important, as many mayors said, that we should highlight the importance of a green and just recovery. And we have now a strong voice in Europe, both when we talk to decision makers in the Parliament, Commission, but also in our nation state, that we need a green transition and a green recovery. And I think I'm hopeful for the cities in the future, because why are people moving to the cities? Of course, it's jobs, and it's to meet other people, education, about dreams, but of course it's also about a rich culture experience, and it's nothing beats live experience and to share that with others. So I know that that's also how we cities can attract both tourists in the future and citizens, of course. And we can see actually a decline in quality of life in Stockholm during the pandemic, when they answered that because we have less and a lack of culture experience, the people feel that it's affecting their quality of life. That's why this sector is so important also, not only for mental health, but also for jobs, of course. But I think that we can use this for the future. In Sweden, we had a strategy called flattening the curve, when it comes to not increasing demand so it's exceed capacity in peak. You can use that if you also plan your cities in the future, so that you can use digital technique to work from home. So not everyone has to commute in the public transport sector in the same time. So we can actually schedule how we commute, how we work, and how how the schools are scheduled in a whole new way. So we can actually use what we have in a much more clever way. But that's another discussion. But I said we will transform, and I'm certain that working together, we can see that we will have a strong collaboration and strong cities, even though it is still a very tough crisis. So I would like to just to quote my colleague from Bristol when he talked about now is the age of Eurocities. Now is the age of cities. I think that was very wise said. So I want to close my comments with that.
Okay. Yes, I'm sure we've all noted. We've all noted, and there's a lot of work to be done for the future. And now I go back to Greg Clark. I must say I do not envy you, Greg. You have 5 minutes, and I will ask you to somehow wrap up all these different perspectives that you heard. It would be interesting to hear if some of them maybe contradict a little bit your initial thoughts, or if on the contrary it has contributed to your initial thoughts. Greg, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jean-Paul. And I must say it's been an honor to listen to these different contributions from many different parts of Europe, and to hear, in a sense, the wise voices of the mayors and the city leaders. I've listened very carefully, and I've organized what I think I heard into 3 things. The first thing is that I think what we heard the mayors doing is bringing a very sharp and clear analysis to COVID-19. They don't just see it as a phenomena, but they have a point of view. And the point of view includes that COVID-19 has exposed underlying and pre-existing weaknesses in the institutional framework, in the way the economy was working, in the way public services have acted. The second bit of the analysis is that COVID-19 has accelerated rather than just created existing trends. It's also fostered some new trends as well, and it's sharpened the focus on things that were already there. And then thirdly, the analysis says that COVID-19 has placed a new emphasis on the need to resolve some very long-standing issues in the role of cities in European life, in the way that cities are reflected in the European institutional framework, if you like, the need through this crisis to create a new social, environmental and civic contract, a new license to operate not just for the economy, but for governments as well. So the mayors have brought an analysis that is distinctive, and it's sharp and it's rich. The second thing I think they've brought to this conversation is a particular kind of mindset. This mindset, I would say, begins with the observation that cities and citizens have been resilient and agile through this crisis. They have used the crisis to spur new ways of managing public space, new ways of deploying institutions. They've converted convention centers into hospitals. They've turned streets, or they've turned roads into streets and streets into public spaces. They've been agile in the way the cities are organized. There has been an underlying resilience that has been both municipal and also community organized that is clear to the mayors and very obvious to them. And this leads them to have a renewed confidence in the key long-term advantages of the cities. Cities as sharing platforms, cities as places of innovation, cities as places where solidarity can be organized effectively. The third part of the mindset that they've brought is this values focus. There's been a strong focus on values, solidarity, trust, mutual confidence, building the fabric of human life in the city, the kinds of things you can touch, feel and smell, not just read in reports. They've also talked a lot about a mindset that is focused on progress, the need to use COVID-19 to pioneer and spur progress, and to create cities, as the mayor of Helsinki put it, that are really functional, trustworthy, dependable, reliable. A strong focus has been on citizen engagement, the city as the lowest level of government, the one that's closest to the citizen and the one that's most able to empower and organize citizens. And part of this mindset has been the very strong connection between human health and planetary health and the need for institutional frameworks to reinforce that. And then the third thing that the mayors have brought, Jean-Paul, is some proposals, and I counted 10 of them. And the first one, of course, is to strengthen the solidarity of the Eurocities network itself. Obvious and clear, but all the mayors have said this. The second one is that the focus on institutional reforms within the EU is absolutely critical. The role of the cities in cohesion, in transition, in recovery, in all of these different programs that are going on, cities, for the obvious reasons, need to be more central. The renewal of subsidiarity, as the Vice President of the Parliament put it. The third one has been around recovery. The recovery needs to have a strong urban lens because people and jobs in economy and carbon emissions are concentrated in cities. There's no recovery from COVID-19 without an urban lens to that recovery program and an urban focus, and the need for that to be explicit, not implicit. The fourth one was really around new financial instruments for cities, new ways, as the Mayor of Bristol put it, to invest in the 15-20-year assets and infrastructures and utilities and services and amenities that cities need, and to have financial models that suit the life cycle of the systems that cities have. Then there was another conversation, the sixth idea, really about the city toolbox, the need for a wider set of competencies. What the pandemic has revealed are the integrated challenges of cities that require new competencies and tools to respond to them. Actually, that was the fifth. The sixth idea is around the new economy. A lot of people spoke about the importance of boosting now the circular economy, the food economy, sustainable economy, the health economy, innovation, digitization, many new sources of jobs for cities here, sources of enterprise, the need to foster the ecosystems that will produce this, great opportunities for new productivity in cities that need to be grasped and seized. The seventh point was really about regulation. As the EU regulates, for example, in the digital space, the need to do this in a way that is sensitive to local economies, indigenous and endogenous activities, independent traders, retailers and others. The need to have a focus on what protects urban economies at the same time as we optimize the opportunities of digitization. The eighth idea was around the recovery of public space, using that much more as a place to create these sharing platforms in cities, public space, public transport, public institutions, public land, making them more open, more tactical, more citizen-centric. The ninth one was about reinventing the tourism, the hospitality, the visitor economy, the need to do that in a way which enriches cities, not in a way that depletes cities, and to create, as it were, a new contract, a new license to operate in that space. And then very lastly, the mayors talked about putting citizens at the center of everything and using the city as a platform to operationalize ideas about trust, about hope, about solidarity, and about a vision for the future. So that's what I heard. I thought they were fantastic. I hope it's a reasonable summary. Impossible to do justice to everything that was said. Thank you.
I think it was an excellent and comprehensive overview. So thank you very much, Greg. It also really concludes nicely our event. Before we close off, I would like to have a final word also from Analisa, and maybe especially on this concept of solidarity and the future of solidarity between cities that has been mentioned several times, and how she just sees that within Eurocities for a few final remarks. Analisa.
Thanks. I'd like to use the word future, though, because if we use future and we look at it as an acronym, maybe we can also highlight a some things that could, on which we could, focus our work for the coming months. So let me use future. F for flexible. We've heard from Greg that cities will go through different phases in this crisis and recovery and so on, phase 1, 2, 3. So we as a network will have to continue be resilient and also adapting, to that and adapt accordingly in order to be a strong tool to support all of you and all the cities in order to do that. U, future, so F, U for unique. As I said at the beginning, I think this crisis is a unique opportunity for cities to rethink their own strategy and for Europe to work differently and empower cities. So we will continue our battle in improving the governance at the EU level. We'll do our best. It's not easy, but you know that. And put cities at the center of the big priorities and the policy making. So we need all the strength from your side as well. T, I would say T for transversal. We've seen how much everything is connected and calls for transformation, actually, also that T. As we said, we're living a crisis of many crises that need transversal approaches and integrated solutions. So the network will continue to find ways to reflect this in our priorities and in the activities and try and avoid the sectors. U as for united, and there I think together we are and we will be stronger, and that's where we've been cooperating across borders so much more than national governments. And I want to take the call from the UK core cities. Eurocities will be reinforcing this even more as we approach the start of Brexit. City to city collaboration also with the UK cities will become even more strong and based on common values like trust, cooperation, solidarity. And then R for recovery, because our strategic framework gives us the capacity to support cities in all the dimensions of recovery, from the social, the economic, the environmental, the democratic transitions, and so on. So recovery will be at the center of our work. Also in ensuring that cities will get the money from the recovery facility. E for European citizens. We've seen how important it is to engage, we engage with cities and citizens and empower them. And so Clara, Joanna's words, all that was said, it's important to do that. And in slowly engaging them in the build of a European identity and avoid the risk of dangerous nationalisms. This, I think, has to be said. And how can we embed this in Eurocities? It will be important to make it as a sort of really background element. And so S, futures for solidarity, of course. Solidarity, we've been calling for this from day one. We were the organization in Brussels, in Europe, to call for solidarity from day one. We did a video. We really based our, declaration on solidarity. It's at the core of our network, of our values, and above all, of our actions. So this will stay, will be reinforced, and it's really what I can say. These were my highlights.
Okay, thank you. Futures in the plural. For more solidarity. So that's a nice one. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the mayors who joined, who gave excellent perspectives. Thank you to Greg as well for excellent overview of the role of cities. Thank you to Clara Dobrev, Vice President of the European Parliament. So really thanks to all of you for having joined. Thanks to all the people from Brest, Leeds, Brussels, Essen, Cologne, Münster, Oslo, Solna, Toulouse, Nantes, Vienna, Porto, Rennes, Utrecht, Berlin, Lyon, Varna, Malmö, Firenze, London, Genoa, Vanta, Porto, all the people who joined to watch this session. You can come back and join us at 3:15 this afternoon. We will be joined by the Vice President of the European Commission, Maroš Šefčovič, for a session on resilient cities for a stronger future. So be with us at 3:15. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for joining and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. See you later. Thank you, Greg.
Europe is like a big city. A place for all to live and work, move and meet, and enjoy life. Most of our people live in cities. They produce most of our economic output and also most of our emissions. That's why the future of Europe will be decided in cities. Yes, our world and our way of life are fragile. Good that our network of European cities is working for a better future for all in the city of tomorrow. Together, we are shaping the urban future